This, believe it or not, is a complete bottle that has melted, and has come in on itself. This I jokingly call a 35-cent piece because it's a quarter and a dime that are fused together.
Dan, what was the most interesting piece that you worked on that's on this table now?
The most interesting piece is the yellow bowl here. It presented quite a challenge trying to get the rim pieces and the body pieces to mend to the base. As you can see, there's a lot of pieces missing. And alongside of the bowl, you can see some additional pieces that belong to this bowl, but they don't mend into anything that is here now.
And it looks as though one of the most important things that you have to do right away is to label everything. Is that right, each piece?
Yes. The white plates I have are still a work in process. The stack of plates in the corner and this stack of plates here were all found on top of each other. Unfortunately, by the time I got my hands on it, all the pieces were in one bag. And so I had no idea except for one or two slides as to how to put it together. Fortunately, for putting it together, the missing piece here and here is bonded to the plate below. So naturally, this plate belongs on top of this one. Under here, I had another different kind of a problem. This piece obviously fits in this hole now, but I didn't know that because I had mended this piece in the hole, and the piece that is bonded beyond it, I didn't know where it went. I assumed it went on a different plate. Very late, I found this piece here. When I found it, it became obvious that the piece I was putting in a different plate belongs to this plate. It fell down, got below the plate, and fused during the fire.
So that's more evidence, too, of the fire.
Yes.
That this was right before the fire.
The other stack of plates don't have the bonding, but they have scars on it, where one sat on top of the other. And I've been able to match the scars and the slide that we have to put that together.
What was the most frustrating item for you?
The frustrating items are these little pieces of glass. Ceramics, when you mend them together, you can slide them and they will lock. Glass is smooth and the pieces do not lock. And so you have to really look at it with a microscope or a high-powered pair of glasses to make sure that they do fit together. And then because my fingers are so big and the bottles are so small, that created another problem.
Now, Dan, you've spent thousands of hours doing this, not just on the Boston Saloon archaeology site, but other places, Piper's.
Piper's.
What is it that is so compelling to you that you spend this time this way volunteering?
I guess as a kid, I'd like to work on jigsaw puzzles. But to be honest with you, everyone tells me you must have a tremendous amount of patience. I don't. I am very impatient. But I am stubborn. I got that Basque blood in me that makes me stubborn. And when I once get started on something, I continue to work on it.
Well, you made the reference to a jigsaw puzzle. This is kind of like a jigsaw puzzle where some of the pieces are missing, and you may have no hope ever of finding those pieces.
Not only are the pieces missing, but I have evidence of two pieces, one on this bowl and one on this plate up here, where the piece was actually found 15 feet away from the stack. Now that bowl, this platter, and these two stacks of plates were all found together. And the slide shows them together. But somehow, over the years before the parking lot was built, pieces moved 15 feet. And you don't expect to find them over there.
But you found it and you brought it back.
Yes.
Well, I think that the state of Nevada is very fortunate that you are a very stubborn Basque person.
And coming up next, we'll talk with the archaeologist who is overseeing the Boston Saloon excavation, noted researcher Dr. Donald Hardesty.
The man who directed the excavation in Virginia City is Dr. Don Hardesty, an archaeologist with the University of Nevada in Reno. Don, you have done some other saloon archaeology in Virginia City. What was it that grabbed your imagination about this particular project?
Well, I think probably the main thing is that the African American community during the Comstock is very poorly known. There are very few accounts of African Americans in Virginia City in documents, and there certainly isn't a oral tradition that would give us information about that community. A lot of what we know about African Americans during this time period comes from sources that are often obviously biased. There's definitely a perception of the community from other residents of the town that are not exactly accurate, or at least reflect certain biases. And archaeology is another way of traveling into the past that gives us an independent account, an independent version of groups like African Americans, especially those that are minority populations that were relatively powerless during the time period, and therefore they don't show up in other documents and accounts that would be more available and more positive for powerful groups.
You know, a lot of people might look at that bottle and say, hey, it's an old bottle, what's the big deal? What is the big deal to you, Don?
Well, an artifact can have a lot of different meanings to an archaeologist when they look at it. I mean, obviously in a saloon, a bottle like this would be expected because it contains liquor, or it contains mineral water, or some substance that is consumed within the saloon itself, and so we think of an artifact as suggesting the kind of activities that would occur. On the other hand, you can also look at an artifact like this as something that has meaning to the people who use it, as well as to the people who observe somebody using it. A bottle like this, for example, filled with holy water, in another context would have an entirely different meaning than the same bottle filled with champagne might in the saloon itself. And so one of the things we're interested in is the meanings that are attached to these kinds of artifacts, and what that can tell us about the African American community who used the saloon, how they used those artifacts to convey messages to the community around them, and what those same artifacts may have meant to people from the outside looking in. Each artifact has a potential of carrying a large number of different meanings, and we're trying our best to translate those meanings into something that will make sense within the context of the African American community during the Comstock.
Were you surprised as the artifacts started to come to light by any of the implications?
The one thing that struck me, and especially having looked at some of the other saloon artifact assemblages, is the abundance and the quality of the tableware and furnishings that came out of the Boston Saloon. It almost gives the impression of being an upscale saloon, which is not something that I would have expected when we first went into it. And of course, we know that the Boston Saloon was a social center for the African American community, and it obviously played roles that may have been somewhat different than saloons in other areas of Virginia City. But it certainly comes across as quite an impressive place.